Thank you for listening to Caleb vs. Self. On this episode, I get a chance to speak with Natsune Oki, the author of the Game of Self Domination. We talk about the book, we talk about how Eastern philosophy impacted her life, including Ikigai, and we focused on the art of doing instead of the measured result. It's a super awesome, fun conversation. Check out Natsune at lifeupeducation.tv, and if you just type in Life Up Education on all social media platforms, she is out there. So if you like what you listen to, check out the book, follow her on social media, and as always, thanks for listening to Caleb vs. Self. For tuning in, and Natsune, thank you so much for coming on. Today's guest on Caleb vs. Self, we have Natsune Oki, the host of Life Up Education TV, the author of the Game of Self Domination, and the managing director of Foreign Connect. So again, I appreciate you hopping on and giving me some time.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Caleb.
Absolutely. The first thing that attracted me to a lot of your content was talking about advancing, and it's on your website, lifeupeducationtv.com, advancing the possibility and capability of humanity as a whole from the perspective of arts and science. And the first thing that I noticed is you have a lot of science. You've got quotes from Albert Einstein. You have quotes from Bill Gates. In your book, you talk about, honestly, so many different things. Right. Your economic background. What is it for you that you get inspiration as far as from art? Because again, there's a lot of science. What art do you feel like you've mixed into not just the book, but your personality and who you are?
Yeah, well, I definitely describe myself as someone with really strong like art sense and very like emotional driven person. And I'm very fascinated by the concept of time, and I get really excited about thinking about future. And that is because future is imaginative and creation, right? Like we still don't know what's going to happen. It's completely up to our imagination and creativity. And when we see future in that way, future is actually inward. Future is already existing inside of us. And science is basically the processes of unlocking that potential of art, the ambition of art in the humanity that's already there. And basically us being smarter, like we have a better chance unlocking more sophisticated and more interesting creativity from inside. And that's kind of how I look at it, because science, when I think about science, is science tells us where we have been, right? Like science tells us data, science tells us experience and knowledges, which makes us smarter, but it doesn't necessarily tell us how much we can go directly. It's definitely supporting data, it's definitely supporting knowledge that we can use, but it's completely up to us. Like imagination, creativity is completely up to us, up to our imagination. And I get really excited about the future because of that reason, because it's just so unknown, and it's complete like freedom. You can create anything you want. So when people ask me like, what does that mean? Like, what is the role of art? My answer to that is like, art is fundamentally what motivates us. Like, what art is the very reason why we get excited about future. Like, what motivates us to want to create output as a humanity as a whole, and really increase the capability of the humanity.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really hard to disagree with you in any capacity, but what I do find interesting is you talk about like the motivation behind it. Somebody might come back to you and say, well, I'm motivated by money. You kind of address that in your book a little bit, but could you kind of expand upon this concept of self-fulfillment, especially like in an art sense? Because a lot of people would look at you and say, no, it's about money, or it's about materials, it's about wealth. It sounds like you're saying the opposite.
Yeah. And then honestly, I'm a big fan of like, you can like whatever you want, right? Like, I don't think I'm right. I don't have enough ego to tell you I'm correct for your world. And my thing is, with my entire book, even like, I encourage you to find your own motivation, own inspiration, own whatever. And that can be definitely money. Like, I don't care if that is, right? And that is also why I speak about the self-awareness, the importance of self-awareness. There's a chapter actually that gives you exact exercise referring
Hmm.
to some of the quotes that I picked up from one Japanese philosophy. We have a term called ikigai, and I kind of like mixed my business sense into that, business strategy looking into that, because in that original ikigai concept, basically there's different circles representing different motivation in life. And then basically the ikigai tells you to find that middle, the center point that overlaps with all the circles. But my approach is slightly different because I come from business. Like, for example, one circle representing like what you can make money for, another circle representing what you feel passionate about,
Hmm.
what you're good at, like stuff like this. And then basically the concept tells you to find the very center point, to find the ikigai. But I tell the other story about that. I tell people, um, it's more practical to diversify where you make money and what is the optimal way to make money for you, and customize it. Like, you don't have to find the center point. Maybe it is more practical that you understand maybe something that you want doesn't make you money in the context of the current society. If that's
Yeah.
so, you can diversify like your passion and your money, like income source and everything like that. So basically, coming back to your point, um sorry, one more point I want to give is,
Sure. Yeah, by all means.
yeah, one more point I want to give is actually Greek philosopher Aristotle, where he says happiness is virtue activity of the soul. So basically, this is to say, pick your poison, like choose your poison.
Right.
Um, and your virtue will be tested like any way you choose. So the only thing you can do is to choose what poison to take, right? So expanding on that idea, I basically tell people, like, it's self-awareness. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know how much money makes you happy. I know how much money makes me happy, but I can't say that to other people. Like, everybody, due to the context of how they grow up, and like so many variables in life, like not non-single person want the same thing, right? Like, I don't even know what my mom wants, or like someone who I'm really close with, like who
Hmm.
I tend to have illusion that I might know them very well, but at the very core I really don't know. I have no idea, right? Because I don't live every single minute that they live in the way they do. And
Hmm.
those moments really accumulates and creates their very own specific demand and needs. And I can't decide that for people. So if that's money that makes you happy, I think by all means they should. But I think the problem here is, like, a lot of people don't necessarily really um, are sure certain about what they want, and basically they just go to the easiest measurement, which tend to align with like how much money you have in your bank and stuff like that. It's very common way to measure. So
Right.
I think that's when the problem arises, because even if you thought you wanted money, once you made it, or once you are in a lot of like having to satisfy that need without necessarily knowing what fulfills your happiness and actual like life purpose, like life fulfillment, like that's when you really need to like look into, wait a minute, like this is not what I want. And I think this is one of the things, like, I believe in free competition by all means. And you know there's a guy, Charles, I forgot his name. He's a Russian writer, but he talks
Okay.
about how when you are into something, you should go all in. And then I agree with that. Like, I can't tell you by words. You gotta experience it. So you can think that you want money and you can work for it really hard. And then those are the lessons that you need to learn for yourself. Because I can tell all I want, like saying like, you don't need money, like you don't money doesn't make you happy, like blah blah blah. But it doesn't speak to you if you don't believe that, right?
Hmm.
And for me, the experience and the learning is much stronger when you experience yourself and then really choose that narration, the truth, as your truth. So, yeah, I'm back to your point, I'm just like not interested in convincing others, and then I'm
Mhm.
not interested in deciding for others of what they want. But I have my own truth, and I just speak of my own truth.
No, that's interesting. And I think you're talking about Charles Bukowski, the
Yes. Yes.
if
Hmm.
you're gonna try, go all the way, right?
Yeah.
The do it, do it, do it all the way.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, with that, and that's a really good, mental state and concept. You talked, if I go back, you were talking about ikigai, and that, like, it sounds like there's some influence of that in your writing specifically. And quite frankly, doing my research, trying to learn as much as I could about you,
Hmm.
it seems like you are pretty damn close to getting to that center point, because it looks like between Foreign Connect,
Hmm.
doing what you're good at, which just seems like it's networking, it's
Hmm.
speaking,
Hmm.
it's getting people on the same page. So you have the ability to get paid to do that. But then on the other hand, you have Life Up Education and you have the Game of Self Domination, which seems to be more of your passion or what you love. So it seems like, as far as Ikigai is concerned, you're pretty damn close.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about what I believe, like if I don't
Yeah.
believe, I can't talk. And then so sorry, I'm going to give you the circle basically. So there's things you love, things you're good at, things you can get paid for, and things that the world needs. And that's
Mhm.
like basically the circles. Um and yeah, my thing is like you said, I tend to pick one from each circle, and definitely, like you said, Life Up is my hands down the passion. I will do it even if I don't get paid, like hands down. And Foreign Connect is just something that just makes sense for me to do because I have a business background. I live in Japan, and I can help Japanese companies to launch and expand business in America, and that's what I do with Foreign Connect.
And do you ever do that vice versa? Do you also help American companies try to launch their products and services in Japan as well?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's about, yeah, both way.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that level of influence with Ikigai, how much do you feel like concepts like that, or more specifically, I guess, Eastern philosophies, which folks in America aren't fully boned up on, how much influence do you feel like comes from that, whether it be in life education TV, whether it be in your writing?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yeah, how much influence do you feel like that Eastern philosophy, that things like
Mm.
Ikigai or Buddhism or
Mm.
any of the things that you've talked about on your videos, how
Yeah.
much of that has influenced your writing and how you
Mm.
approach your life?
Right. I see. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Actually, I wasn't even aware that I carried this kind of Eastern thinking until like someone from Western world obviously pointed
Hmm.
out of that about me. And I think without my intention, this is one of the really cool thing about having the opportunity to live in both countries for a long period of time, right? Like I basically grew up in Japan, born and raised, but I also lived in America for a very long time. I definitely get a sense of both sides of the culture, and some people even reject one out of the other, right? Like some people go with only one way of living, one way, one
Right.
side of view, like, right? Like, but my thing is like,
Absolutely.
I have such a natural appreciation for both side. Like I literally align with both side, which is a really cool thing. I recently find out about myself. But that being said, I think a lot of stuff I talk about still um, definitely have some imprint from American thinking. Like I definitely believe in like, everything is possible. Let's, go for American dream. Like let's shoot for big star. Like let's go, right?
Hmm.
Because in Japan, for example, when we talk about being humble, it's not really necessarily a good term in my opinion because Japanese way of thinking humble is like you're nobody, so therefore you shouldn't try nothing. Like that's kind of the vibe I get. But when we
Okay.
talk about humbleness in America, combining what I said previously is to say you're nobody. Therefore, in order for you to achieve, you gotta work really hard. You gotta like double your hard work, right? Like
Right.
that's my mindset. So I take good side of the both cultures basically. um and for as far as the Japanese thinking goes, I think one thing I notice a lot about me is that I definitely have this like really zen approach. I'm a lot less emotional in the lowest time nor the highest time whenever I face in a daily life. I'm very calm. I accept the reality as they are. I tend to, and I tend to have very high sense of emotional control. And I think it definitely comes from Japanese upbringing.
I mean, given everything that's happening in America today, yeah, I would agree with you. That's not necessarily a Western or American, I should say,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, and
perspective on life.
it's kind of crazy because in it also even shows up in my daily life, like my daily interaction with people. Like when I speak with Japanese people, I'm not necessarily a quiet person. Like people tell me I'm not shy. Like people tell me
Hmm.
I'm very like, I laugh a lot, I make jokes a lot, I'm kind of loud. Well, loud in a sense that I can talk, right? But
Right.
in America, people actually tell me I'm quiet, like I'm a quiet person, and it's kind of like interesting how different culture, or even maybe I changed too a little bit, right? But it's kind of interesting to see how being considered one way in Japan doesn't necessarily be viewed in the same way in America. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does because I think even though you're the same person regardless of where you are,
Mhm.
I'm sure that speaking English, which by the way you do a fantastic job at. You probably speak English better than most English speakers. but,
Thank you.
but coming to a foreign country and having to
Mhm.
learn a new language,
Yeah.
naturally you're probably going to be a little bit more subdued.
Mm,
But I
yeah.
have to imagine that
Mhm.
over the course of time and your mastery of the language has allowed you to open up a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
So piggybacking off of that, when you made that decision, because I know you talked on another podcast or
Mhm.
another interview talking about your time from high school essentially
Yeah.
to getting to college, and that you were essentially the only person who made that jump, at least in
Yeah.
your town or your village, right?
Mhm.
How scary was that, first of all, and second of all, do you talk about that in a certain way, whether it be in your book or in your videos? Because it seems like that's also had a profound impact on you.
Oh yeah, definitely did. And that's a very good question. Um, how scary was it? I was scared shitless, like to be honest. Like, I had no idea what to expect. I've never been outside of Japan at that point. I have actually, sorry, I lied, but it was nothing like serious, right? Like it was like just little Singapore, little Hong Kong, like something really low key.
Right.
For less than like a week, like so I never actually had the actual like sense of like what it's like to interact with foreigners even. Like
Hmm.
I had no idea, and it just like was out there, and I knew that there were countries that exist outside of Japan. But
Sure, sure.
if you come to Japan, like you understand what I mean, because in Japan, for a long time we've been like closed country, right? Like
Hmm.
kind of like North Korea right now, but like this is like years ago. Like Japan had always been kind of like island insider only kind of
Right.
country. So definitely right now that's not it. The country doesn't operate in that way anymore at all, but definitely there's that effect from that era. So people are not as international or knowledgeable about countries outside of Japan as much as other countries, you can probably imagine. And then
Right.
so that was me. Like I was just a typical like high schooler in Japan, and only thing that I I already knew at that time, however, was that I was different. I just didn't know that I would belong to other country. I just
Mhm.
thought I wasn't Japanese for some reason, but that's because like I was just really different kid, and I
Well,
couldn't fit in. And then,
right.
at some point, it got really bad that people try to like kick me out from my high school, and then I I knew that if I just stayed where I was, like I had no opportunity to be successful because of the narration that I was believing in, that I was a loser,
Okay.
and people like told me that I was. And then I thought, I know that I'm different, but I know that there is a world out there that I can like still fit in. Because like at that point, I was already kind of philosophical person, and
Hmm.
like I had this like little blog, and people like visited my blog and everything like that, and people like told me I was different and stuff like that. So I felt like it, I shouldn't be stupid. Like there are people who appreciate my stuff, and I
Hmm.
feel like I just need to find that product and market fit, right? Like in this case, like human and market fit, I guess.
Sure.
So, that was my whole idea. The first time ever thought about like, let's just fuck it, like, let's just move. Um,
Right.
but once I decide, I think I had like a good like 6 months just having to like prepared for that. And like you said, like there was no one else at all from my village, who would do that, right? Like I would be the only one person who decided to do it. um so I just didn't know what to expect at all. But I was also excited. I was scared, but yeah, in the end it worked out perfectly. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of what happened. And sorry, what you had a second question I forgot to mention. What was that?
Just how that
How that
experience
experience, right?
has,
uh,
yeah, impacted you.
yeah, so I think it definitely impacted me in a sense that it definitely expanded my mind. And also I think just generally it gave me a lot of confidence in myself that I wasn't being broken. Like I just was placed in the wrong place.
Right.
And
Okay.
yeah, so that really gave me the courage to be who I am. And it was really the first affirmation or confirmation that it's okay to be who you are. Because in Japan we even have this idiom, for example, deru kugi wa utareru. Basically that talks about if you stick out, like, you get banished basically.
Hmm.
So, and I definitely see that in the Japanese culture way more than in American culture.
Yeah, it's a very traditional mindset, and especially since I mean, you didn't grow up in Tokyo. You grew
Hmm.
up in a village outside.
Yeah.
There's and just like here in America, I don't know if you've ever spent time in other parts or in more rural parts of America, but it's the same way. It's very traditional, and sometimes you have to make that leap. When you
Hmm.
made that leap too, it seems like from that leap a lot of what you talk about and what you reference specifically, more of that like tough love almost mentality.
Hmm.
Do you feel like that also came from that? Because I can envision you getting to America,
Yeah.
biting the bullet, going through all the scary stuff, and then realizing at the end of it, hey, I'm not dead. Like
Yeah.
I didn't die. I wasn't banished. Everything's going all right. Wow, I'm
Hmm.
glad I took this chance.
Hmm.
Is that what you also talk to people about when you talk to them, like taking that chance, taking that risk?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one another thing, it's kind of common saying, but you're more scared when you don't know what you're scared of, basically, right? And that was the biggest feeling I had, was like I was scared for nothing, and then I just didn't know what to even be scared of. And it was a lot easier once I've done it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So yeah, that was a lot of that. And by all means, though, I another thing I talk about a lot is, however, I feel like, mm, I mean, the education aligned with this like an industrial era up until now, right?
Hmm.
And the government and the schools and everything like want you to be like about the average point so that it's easier to manage as a whole country.
Hmm.
And I think that's I honestly I can't predict in terms of like economy and like where we're heading. Like I think there's more space, it's more practical, and there's more space for the general society, the general education, to allow students to have a little bit more variables and variation in terms of the characteristic and their interest and everything like that, because we can afford it with the progress of the technology economy and everything like that we have. It's practical now, but I feel like believing in the free competition, I also feel like maybe that is how it should be. Because in the end of the day, like, we can't blame the system. I think if you mean to win, if you mean to lose, like, that's gonna happen, right? Like, and then, sorry,
Yeah.
it's probably not even a good word. Like, if you mean to be someone different and you actually want to be someone different, like, you gotta fight, like, to be someone different. And I think the system is already here. So the only thing you can control is like, so are you willing to take all that, like, rejections, or like, hold back, and then still have the courage to come to the other side? And if you pass that test, this is one of the things we talked about, like, happiness is virtue activity of the soul, right? Like,
Hmm.
then you are qualified to wanna have a different life to begin with. And I feel like anyone who lose that competition should lose. Like, they're not qualified, because
Huh.
living the different life actually requires more difficulties and more mental capability, and you're not capable of handling that right now at this time. So, and that being said, like, I definitely believe that the life is, um redoable anytime. Like, anytime you decide, you can, like, you can commit to be better. So that is also why I use the word the game in my book.
Hmm.
um but yeah, so that's how I kind of feel like whenever we have this conversation shifting to, like, pointing finger at the system, I feel like in the end of the day, nothing should be your reason to, like, blame, because if you mean to win, like, you win. And I think, at least as far as the mindset goes, I think that's the kind of right kind of attitude you should always have.
So let me ask you this then, because a lot of that mentality is about going forward, taking that risk, and winning the game essentially. And obviously,
Mhm.
when you take those risks,
Yeah,
you're going to lose sometimes. You talk
yeah,
about that as well.
yeah,
If you are pushing everybody, if I'm looking from a societal perspective and you want
yeah.
everybody to pursue and to win, somebody has to lose, and typically more people lose
Hmm.
than win. So
Yeah.
from that perspective, and especially obviously you're from the tech culture, you're very experienced with a lot of the folks that are in that space.
Hmm.
With AI advancing at the rate it's rating and technology advancing at the rate that it's going, do you feel like there's the potential for countries or societies to start implementing like UBI so that people can take more risk and find themselves more? Or are you of the mindset of, regardless of AI, regardless of big technology,
Hmm.
you still have to figure it out?
I think both, like,
Okay.
both happening. Definitely, one other thing I want to say is, like,
Mhm.
influencers and esports and, like, all that industry didn't even
Yeah.
exist like 50 years ago, even, like, less than that, right? Like, 10,
Right.
10 years ago, sorry, 10 years ago. Um, and all that industry was made because of the technology, basically. And everything else, like other jobs that involves with technology, also didn't exist for like 50 years ago. And
Right.
so that being said, I feel like, there was an episode I actually spoke about with my best friend and a guest. We talked about the ultimate form of humanity, and our conclusion basically was the ultimate form of humanity should be a state where people can be whoever they want to be, doing whatever they want to do. Um, and that was basically our conclusion of that conversation, and I believe that we are heading to that direction. But I think in the same at the same token, like, when we talk about practicality of, like, what is actually happening right now and what is actually possible right now, um, I don't know when that kind of form is gonna arrive in our, like, actual real world. I don't know if that's gonna happen within when I'm alive. Probably it will, but the thing is, like, when we talk about practicality, like you said, if there's a winner, that means there's also losers.
Hmm.
And there's a this concept that I found very interesting from James Clear. He says, absolute success is luck, relative success is habits and hard work. And I found it very interesting. Like, I feel like that's the kind of mindset. Like, yeah, of course, if you're not good, you will lose. But are you
Right.
gonna quit? Like, because as long as you keep trying, like, you still get a shot. And if you are in a position where you say, ah, if I'm not certain that I'm gonna win, I'm not gonna even put in the work, then I can guarantee one thing is that you're never gonna succeed in long term. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel. Like regardless of the chance or the odds or whatever, like you have to be crazy enough if you want to be someone, uh, like, well, I don't want to say someone, but if you want to pursue what you want to pursue in a
Hmm.
term you want, like, and something that's crazy, you think it's crazy, then you have to be that crazy person. Like you have to have that courage to be that crazy person. And yeah, it's very emotional, like, process too, because sometimes in terms of logic, yeah, maybe some things don't make sense for you to pursue anymore, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like, that's what life is. Like you're living for your dream, you're living for your inspiration, and maybe some things don't make sense, but because you pursue it regardless of the odd, like that's what makes the life more beautiful. That's what makes life more, like, amazing, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I tend to subscribe to the Theodore Roosevelt kind of concept, and that is a strenuous life, right? You should always be pursuing something, whether it's
Mm,
physical, mental, spiritual, because without that challenge and without overcoming those obstacles,
mhm.
you're never going to get that feeling of, hey, I did something. So, for example, when you wrote your book,
Yeah,
I'm guessing you spent so many hours, thousands of hours potentially,
yeah,
writing, rewriting, editing, reading it again, doing it
yeah,
all over again.
yeah.
And that process was difficult. It was probably hard.
Mhm,
But when you finally published it, when you got it in your hands and it was all done,
uh-huh.
how good of a feeling was that?
Oh, it was great. But also, like, the thing was, like, I never intended to be an author. Like I just felt like I had a message that I need to convey to the world, and I wanted to be in every form possible because now it comes with the practicality. Me having a business background, like I understand that the market is the market. Like I need to adapt to the market. I can't tell people what form to consume, but I have to
Mhm.
be flexible. Like I have to be where the consumers are. And people like to listen, people like to read, people like to watch, like people consume content in a different ways. And I just wanted to be in all forms of the content for the leaders.
Right. Which is why you have it everywhere. You're on Twitter, you're on TikTok, you're on
Yeah.
Instagram, you're on Facebook, you're on YouTube, you're
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's the business side of you, I'm guessing, trying to make sure that you're getting full market exposure for
Yeah.
what it is that you're trying to convey.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. That's something that is really difficult to do. And
Mhm.
from all the stuff that I've looked at, it seems like you're maintaining that extremely well, all things considered.
Thank you.
So, moving on from a little bit more of that, one thing that really struck out to me
Yeah.
is in chapter 8, you talk about managing your energy
Mhm.
instead of managing your time. And
Yeah.
that is something that I can tell you as soon as I read that, I said, "Oh fuck, that's where I'm screwing up."
Mm.
I'm not I think of the day as 24 hours. I sleep for 6. This I can do this in an hour, that in an hour, this in an hour, that in an hour. But
Mm.
the reality is by the time 3 o'clock in the afternoon comes along, I'm ready to hit the hay. So how do you do that? How do you manage your energy? How do you put that in a perspective that's applicable to most people?
Yeah. So I feel like everything I talk about really go more toward like long term, like mindset building, character building, like long term success versus like strategies. And
Okay.
that's where the intent of that chapter comes from. Is like n- like like I said, like earlier, like absolute success can be attributed to luck,
Mhm.
whereas like relative success is attributed to habits and hard work, right? And
Yep.
that's basically the exact application of that. Is no matter how well you manage your time, no matter how well you manage your strategy and like everything to basically look for the transactional, like that, like money today mentality, like it just never gonna last, right? Like I feel like it's much more important that you find something that you feel really excited about over time, regardless of the results, maybe in a short term, but like actually feel excited about building something long term, and
Hmm.
actually that adds to your happiness. So, managing energy, I think a lot of business owners also, like they fail, including myself. I was also eh, guilty of this before, but I was so looking into the numbers. Like I was like, really everything I did was about numbers, and I just like that kind of level of focus just didn't last. And I always like so thought about managing tasks in a way you did too, right?
Yeah.
And just in terms of like numbers, in terms of like sales results and everything like that, like, and there's definitely like balance required. Like in order for you to like not die, you still do have to care for it. But at the same time, like
Yeah.
it's just not fun. Like if everything you do is just um about money, like that's like whole, back to the whole point of what I talked about in the self-awareness. Just
Hmm.
like, I mean, people have a different balance in that between the two, but for me personally, it's not fun for me to just maintain everything with like result strategies. And in reality, like, you know trying to take something out of someone never is a good strategy for long term. Like you should it's much rather um it's much better off that you actually build relationship with customers, for example. You build like long-term asset instead of like
Hmm.
short-term, like disposable, like income. Like, so that's kind of where I come from, and I kind of dissected it in terms of like time management. Dissected
Yeah.
my thinking in terms of time management.
So, in summation, I'm going to try and put this into words, and hopefully, I'm talking about this correctly. When you look at energy versus time
Hmm.
in the perspective of running a business, like the example that you had, is
Yeah.
instead of exclusively focusing on number of units moved, how much product, how many sales, how many X's and O's,
Hmm.
you're saying that in order to manage that energy a little bit better, you have to also factor in other things like, in the business case,
Hmm.
customer relationships, managing expectations with them, connecting with them on a certain level, so that instead of focusing exclusively on unit for unit, you're looking at long-term customer relationships, and that seems to be a way that you can um, focus your energy in a more productive way. It sounds like.
Yeah, my thing exactly, and I think you said it very well. But basically, my point is like, instead of focusing on like hard, like cold, just like number basis, which is like
Hmm.
beneficial in a long short term also, but like in a long term, like you need to find that excitement. You need to find that like purpose beyond numbers that
Hmm.
keeps you excited about what you're doing.
Yeah. So
So
if I apply
managing
that to
energy.
other areas of my life, for
Mhm.
example, I like to run.
Yeah.
A lot of runners look at mileage per week. I've
Mhm.
done 30 miles this week. I've done 50 miles this week, or I need to maintain X amount, or I need to maintain this pace. I'm going to run 4 miles and it better be 32 minutes,
Mhm.
that type of thing. But instead of focusing exclusively on the end result or the numbers,
Mhm.
make sure you're focusing on the actual run itself. What are you thinking about? How are you feeling?
Mhm.
Maybe running 4 miles today super duper fast isn't going to be helpful. It's not
Mhm.
going to be productive.
Exactly. And at the same, like also like, in terms of running, like if you don't feel like running, fuck it, don't run today. And like run tomorrow if you want to run.
Sure,
Like
sure.
that's kind of like the summary of, I don't know, the application of in terms of running. And I do, you know what I'm trying to say is like
Yeah.
just like energy, like you don't have to like force yourself to like just for the production, right? I mean,
Right.
maybe you do lose some benefits of doing something, but in terms of like perseverance, you probably have way better results when you focus on like how are you feeling versus like your products per unit.
Right. So for I'm going to try and use a different example in a business context.
Mm.
So I have a coffee company.
Yeah.
I'm super passionate about coffee, and really my passion, and hopefully I'm saying this right from what you're saying. My passion is to get people the best coffee. So when they wake up in the morning and they have that cup of coffee, they feel great.
Hmm.
That's more important, and focusing on that balanced with looking at numbers is a
Hmm.
better way to approach achieving those goals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I absolutely can appreciate that mentality.
Yeah.
So let me keep on going, right, with Start Ugly, because that was episode 20.
Yeah.
For anybody that's listening, if you go to Life Up Education TV on YouTube, episode 20, Natsune talks about starting ugly.
Hmm.
That I feel like is such a huge obstacle for people.
Yeah.
What would you tell people specifically about not giving a fuck how you start? Because
You
that
don't.
seems to be
Mhm.
extremely important for you.
Right. You don't mean anything. I think that's the best punchline right there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that people tend to forget is that really you don't mean shit to anyone. Like, but the thing is, like, the world never looks at you from the very same filter that you use to look at yourself or to look at other people. Like, you
yeah.
just can't control other people's opinion. So even if you make the best shit, like, not everybody thinks it's the best shit. And even if
Right.
you think like you made like some of the worst shit, not everybody think it's the worst shit, right? And it's high, like, you can't predict that for other people. And people have different life context. People grow up differently. People have different life preferences and everything. People are in a different stage of their life too. Like, it's just impossible that you control people's perception of you. Um, I mean,
Just
you
like your
can,
blog in high school.
yeah, exactly.
Right? Because everybody in the village was like, "This is garbage. You're never going to be anybody."
Yeah,
But you had to go out and find out, oh, that's not necessarily true.
yeah, exactly. So, I feel like a lot of people can't start because of the insecurity, which, like, I definitely have empathy for it because I used to feel that way too. But the reality is, like, you know you don't mean anything in the end of the day. So I have two things. One, you don't mean anything, meaning that even if you fail, no one cares. And then the second thing I want to say,
Okay.
the second thing I want to say is, like, you just can't decide what's good for other people, and you just can't decide what's bad for other people. Like, that's the 2 cents.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that goes back to that self-awareness, being able to extrapolate who you actually are to yourself
Hmm.
and worrying less about what everybody thinks of you, because there's more value, there's more happiness, there's an easier pursuit to oneself when you remove all the noise.
Exactly. Hmm.
Yeah.
And really, like, no one cares, really. Like, no one cares. Even if you succeed, even if you fail, like, literally no one cares. You probably have, like, good week of gossip, like, going around within your friends, or if you're famous, like, maybe even entire community, but that's it. Like, people are busy.
Yeah. Yeah. Then and that brings me into another one. So going through all of your work and reading a lot of stuff, you obviously have a community of people that you depend on,
Mm-hmm.
folks that you bounce ideas off of,
Mm-hmm.
people that you talk to. And the one thing I feel like, and I could be wrong, that isn't, I don't want to say it's missing, but I feel like I want more from you
Mm-hmm.
in your content is what's so important about the people around you? What's so important about being able to have those conversations, being able to have that support group, to be able to, maybe you're going through a tough time, you talk to a friend and they get you out of that funk, or maybe you just have these ideas and you talk to somebody and it helps you formulate to where you want to be. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like that is important to you, but there's not a ton of content
Mm-hmm.
talking about that so much. So I'm wondering if you can help me find out who is your support group, how do you use them, and what's so important about that.
I think recently I joined some clubs, like, online. One of them being Startup School. It's this
Okay.
forum that you can join and made by Y Combinator. And basically, this is a group of founders who can share and talk about their business challenges. And that's been very helpful for me. I also tune into a lot of, like, business influencers. to just kind of like listen to what they think about different things. And they help me generate my thoughts as well. But in
Okay.
terms of like, I think in terms of like how helpful that is, I think number one thing I can think of is like, the power of a community is when I have a hard time, when I'm not getting the amount of clients I want, or when I'm like really struggling in the execution part of it, or like delivering the results and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
just talked to other founders, for example, from other agencies, and I noticed like shit, like everybody goes through the same thing, same thing as I do, and
Right.
that's very powerful and encouraging for me personally, because I feel like I'm not alone, first of all, and I feel like you, just by knowing and having empathy for other uh, members of the community, knowing that they're going through the very same thing, like I just feel like I need to like, if I want to keep up with them, like I gotta do this, right? So that's something I notice is very powerful in terms of perseverance.
Interesting. Is that where you got that chance to talk to Nicholas Henriksen?
No, actually, he is.
Oh, okay.
I recruited him from LinkedIn, and he was actually a really interesting guy. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, the other one I want to talk about real briefly is on Twitter. You had another. Well, I think it was technically TikTok, but I saw it on Twitter. Either way, and that was the reason why I tell people the world is never about you. Um,
Yeah.
and how that breeds that soft and vulnerable
Mhm.
state of getting into those failures. Can you expand a little more upon that?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Sorry, I know that I posted it recently, but I forgot what exactly I said. Um, hold on. Let me.
Yeah, I mean the caption is just the very reason why I tell people the world is never about you, and essentially what you
Oh,
talk about in it
right,
is
right, right. The
how. Okay,
burnable.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure what I said. Yeah, exactly. So I think when you become entitled that you deserve something, and then that you deserve something, that's when, as you as an entrepreneur, you're done, because you're too
Mhm.
soft to work in the dirt. Like that's my mentality. Like, we're not talking about like C-level executives or like managers, like these people. Like we're talking about entrepreneurship. And in terms of entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs, if you are entrepreneur, you like losing, and you need to take that humility if you're entrepreneur. And if you are like a manager, C-level people, like maybe that's not necessarily true, but in a company, different roles play different things, and entrepreneurs are basically creators. Entrepreneurs are idea initiator. Entrepreneurs
Mhm.
are like a very first initiator of the business, right? So
Right.
that itself requires different kind of characters for you to be entrepreneur. And then executive level, that also has its role, which is now you need to keep on like maintaining the business, now expanding the business, right? So from going to 0 to 1 versus like 1 to 10 is completely different concept. But when we
Right.
talk about 0 to 1, like you have to have that humility to say like, you know w- when you're too good to do something, like you're just too soft, you're just too burnable to whatever's thrown to your face, like from the market, because the market is always right. Like you
Mhm.
might want to think that you are so smart that you are correct for everything, but in reality you can cry and bitch about it like when you're wrong, and then you can say like I'm right, like I'm like the market is wrong, whatever. But in reality that doesn't let you to produce anything, because you're contradicting with the market, and as a consequence you're going to lose. But if you are so set with your ego of like how important you are, how smart you are, how great you are, and then can't have that humility to like let the market to tell you what actually is going on, then you're just too soft to even pivot the business, or you're just too vulnerable to be fluid about your idea. And I think I see that a lot in a lot of people. I think is like they become too important in their head, and they just can't have that humility to say, look, I was wrong. Like, I want to focus on production. I want to focus on like producing something versus like I want to sit on my self-importance, and I want to tell you that I'm right, because the feedback is here, and that's, if that's not telling you that you're right, then you're not right. um yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
Hmm.
I definitely see what you're talking about when it comes to entrepreneurship, because you're right. It's pass fail. There is
Hmm.
no curve. There is no grade. You don't get to pass with a C. You either make it or you don't. So I
Hmm.
can appreciate all of that.
Yeah.
And for those of you guys listening, if you're interested in any more of this content, again, check out Natsune on Life Up Education TV, pretty much on any social media platform. If you want, go to lifeupeducationtv.com. Check out the book. It's on sale there, The Game of Self Domination. There is a special promotional thing going on there. So if you want to learn more about it, head over to the website, click around, get a copy of the book. Natsune, I appreciate all the time that you've given me. I appreciate all of the feedback. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Karen.
Absolutely.